Hello, everyone, and welcome in. Swarm Talk brought to you by the Crowded Booth. We're talking Georgia Tech Louisville, just a couple days away till toe meets leather and the Jackets take on the Cardinals. Excited to talk about it tonight on this episode of the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in. If you're watching live on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and thanks so much. Last night, we surpassed 2,000 subscribers here on the channel. The road to 3K begins now. We appreciate you as we get ready to talk Georgia Tech against Louisville. It's going to be a big matchup. Me and the other guys were talking when we look tomorrow night where we're going to be taking a look at some of the, I guess the best way to put it is some of the better games of the weekend and previewing. We're going to get the Georgia Tech Louisville preview out on the Georgia Tech centered side of things here tonight. Tomorrow, you heard Ralph's thoughts on Georgia Tech. You're going to hear Will's thoughts on Georgia Tech tomorrow. We'll take a look at that game, take a look at the spread, and the guys will take their best bets approaches as well. So make sure you tune in tomorrow night, College Football Show live. It's going to be very, very very, very fun. And let's go ahead and thank people for watching. Ian Gwaltney. Let's see if in-flight Wi-Fi is enough to keep this stream running. Go Jackets, fly Delta. Appreciate you doing what you're doing and making sure you watch the show. But look, let's talk about this. A lot of people with issues with the title. I was getting some text messages. I was getting some Facebook comments that didn't really appreciate the title of saying, can Georgia Tech upset Louisville in the Benz? Here is the clear-cut facts of the situation. It's not my opinion. It's not anyone else's opinion. We're going strictly off of Vegas. Vegas says with that 8-point spread, 7.5-point spread, depending on where you're looking, if Jackets were able to win this game, that defines as an upset. If you are not favored, you're the underdog. Therefore, you would be upsetting what they're projecting to happen. That's just cut and dry. That's what we're talking about. So that's why it's titled this. I think there's a reason. Obviously, Louisville's favored in this. We talk about the preseason hype, but that's all of your opinion. That's all what your thoughts. We're going strictly based off the facts here of what Vegas is giving us, and they're giving us that point spread. Does it mean it'll happen? No. If Georgia Tech goes out there and wins 41-17, were they wrong? Probably, yes. But right now, what we're saying is that if this team comes out and loses this game or wins let's say Georgia Tech wins this game, then we're going to be talking about them upsetting Louisville. That's why it's entitled that. We get to a couple topics now. We're going to talk first about who is Louisville. We're going to run through some keys to the game and then get final thoughts and predictions. You were with us last Thursday night. You know I walked through the schedule, finished up with Georgia Tech 5-7, and I'm going to need Ralph and Will's up in the background. I need that over-under on what this game was. I think it was around 48.5. I believe that was right, but we'll see. We'll see. Let's get to the first topic, though. Who is Louisville? Who are the Cardinals? Obviously, the big news has been, talked about that Jeff Brom is the guy. This is much like Brent Key coming back to Georgia Tech as the head coach. And I say coming back, I mean, it's kind of been a homecoming of sorts for him to get that job, be named the head coach last December. This is a similar sort of story with Brom coming back and coaching the team that he played for. So it's an interesting storyline. You have two guys really entering their debuts. Obviously, Brent Key was able to enter kind of a pseudo debut as an interim, but I'm throwing all that out the window because of the emotions that come in with an interim head coach. This is kind of where we're seeing. So Jeff Brom comes in. It's going to be very, very interesting to kind of watch how he develops this. But here's a couple things when we look at the preview. Brom was a quarterback at Louisville. What does he bring in this equation? And you're right, Louisville doesn't know anybody. So if that's kind of one of those things where, in the background, Will Manna says Louisville don't know nobody. Check out the Don't Know Nobody podcast coming out here at some point. But look, let's talk about Brom's offensive system. Let's start right here. The offensive system for Jeff Brom, it didn't necessarily light the world on fire at Purdue last season like a lot of folks thought it might. And a lot of folks, I think, are reading into the preseason hype of Louisville. They're thinking it's going to carry over that way. Purdue finished 55th in the nation in total offense, 74th in scoring last year. Now listen, Louisville last season under Scott Satterfield finished 48th and 73rd scoring. Back in 2021, Purdue was a top 35 total offense. Louisville was 21st. So it's not that necessarily that they've been bad. It's just Louisville's been a little bit better. So what type of offensive edge can Brum bring to this offense? And that's going to be something that's very interesting to kind of walk and talk about. Obviously, it starts with the quarterback position. Jack Plummer transferring in from Cal. Yes, I know I said last night of the show, Cal is not good, not a good football team. Ralph and I talked about it, terrible brand, just, it is what it is. But when he was healthy at Cal, he showed some spurts. He's 6'5", 215-pound veteran quarterback who's played a lot of football in his career, played at Cal, was at Purdue with Jeff Brum. So he understands how to run the system, run the scheme, and run the offense. That's something that I think super key, no pun intended, super key in the fact that you want a quarterback when you're coming in as a new head coach to be able to help with that seamless transition of sorts. So I really like the fact that they brought in Plummer. That's kind of been, a job for them where they've said, hey, we're going to bring in Plummer. We're going to help with that transition because when you look at it, the passing game, it has to be more efficient for Louisville to have any type of success this season. So, I like what the Cardinals did. If Plummer were to go down, what does it look like? We have last year's backup in Brock Dahman, the 2021 main backup in Evan Conley, and, two other guys, and one of them being a guy that Georgia Tech fans are familiar with. He was linked to the Jackets when he entered the portal from Tennessee, went to UNLV, now at Louisville. Harrison Bailey is now here at Louisville. Brady Allen from Purdue as well. So while the starting quarterback is new, he has some familiarity with this Louisville style offense that Brum's going to bring in. But the main wideouts, the main pass catchers, they're almost all brand new. And we got to shout out a guy local to the Columbus, Georgia area, Jamari Thrash out of Troup County, was a All-American type of player at Georgia State, now moves on. Can he continue that same success? At Louisville in the ACC, that's going to be something. He's the most experienced and the most dangerous. They also have Kevin Coleman, who was one of the key recruits that Deion Sanders brought into Jackson State. Louisville was able to nab him out of the portal. They also bring in Cincinnati's Jaden Thompson and Tennessee's Jimmy Callaway. Those are going to be all those guys that are kind of in that rotation. If you've watched and gone back and watched some of Purdue games, Jeff Brum loves to use the tight end. And so they've got a 6'5", 260-pound recruit, Jamari Johnson, that they're hoping is going to step in right away at the tight end position and start to kind of do some things that can, once again, lead to more explosion on the offensive side of things. When we talk about what's in the backfield, look, we all know over the past couple of years, and look, Georgia Tech had some success. Ralph and I were talking about, I think it was 46-27. Georgia Tech beat Louisville in 2021 or 2020. Can't remember which year it was. Here's where Louisville has been known for Malik Cunningham. The guy was, a dangerous runner, but when you look and kind of go back to the stats, he wasn't the leading rusher. Jawar Jordan is back, and he averaged 5.7 yards per carry with 815 yards. Maurice Turner is going to be an option who's going to be able to rotate. Also with a guy in Isaac Guriendo, former Wisconsin backup that comes in through the portal. Bottom line, this is a team that has brought in a ton of talent through the transfer portal, much like Georgia Tech has in the sense in trying to find, some options for them, especially up front. Brian Hudson and Renato Brown are tackle, but the transfer portal trying to help that left side of the offensive line and Eric Miller, Willie Tyler, and John Paul Flores. They're trying to fill some holes up front. What is that offensive line going to look like? I think that's going to be something we have to ask ourselves when we get to Friday. Kind of rounding out the who is Louisville portion is the offense. You feel like if the offense is fine, what does the defense look like? Here's my question with Louisville is the main pass rushers from this unit are gone. They're no longer there. So you can't really say, well, they were really, really good last year in this category. And when you look back at Purdue's numbers, they weren't fantastic rushing the quarterback. They finished 10th last season, and it's the same defense coordinator that Brom had at Purdue, Ron English coming over. Louisville last year, folks, was number 1 in the country in sacks, Purdue's 7th in tackles for loss, and they allowed 70 fewer yards per game than Purdue did. So they were really good last year in this category. Is it going to make sense for them to be able to keep that up? I'm not necessarily sure. We talked about the main pass rush gone. Ashton Gilliott is a terrific player that they really like up there. 6'3", 270-pound end, coming off of the edge. They got Arizona State transfer, a big guy that can plug up the middle, 320 pounds, Jermaine Lowell. If he can stay healthy, he's missed most of the last 2 years. So once again, that's a big question mark for them. Here is where, and we're going to get into some of the comments here in a section. We're going to get into kind of the keys for Georgia Tech that I think that they have to kind of hit on. It's the top 3 linebackers from last year transferred, either transferred or done. And so they don't have necessarily that to work with in the category of being able to stop a Georgia Tech run game or in the passing game. They loaded up on the receiving core. Louisville did, but they really did a nice job in the secondary as well. They brought in Storm Duck, got to be an all-name type of guy, cornerback from North Carolina, Marquise Groves-Kilbrew from Texas A&M, another talented young man. They also have a star in essentially Jarvis Brown-Lee, who had 67 tackles with 2 interceptions and 12 broken passes last season. You're going to have Cameron Kelly. You're going to have Devin Neal, Gilbert Frierson, make a good safety situation, even around a veteran player they have on that back end in Josh Minkins. So there is who Louisville is. I think that we can say Louisville is a team that's going to come in. I feel like they're going to understand what they want to do offensively. It's where defensively, they're still going to try to figure some things out. Offensively, the reason being they have a guy in Jack Plummer. I think that when you bring in a quarterback that understands the system, especially in a new environment, in a new place, but he has that relationship with the head coach, Brom Morvan, obviously an offensive-minded guy, I think that's huge for them getting to where they want to be. So, that's where we sit right here with kind of what Georgia Tech needs to do, especially kind of getting to those keys. Ralph, let's go to those keys right here. The keys for Georgia Tech. Now we roll in here. The keys for Georgia Tech win. Number 1, we got to mention it, the run game has to be effective. You might say, well, obviously it has to. But this is a Georgia Tech run game that I think is, one, going to be the calling card of this team in 2023. Anything that they're going to want to do is going to have to be set up to have a good running game. You often hear this comment made across the SEC, Big Ten, and other conferences as well. And I think it speaks for what Georgia Tech wants to do is you really can't have a passing game if you don't have a running game. Because if a team can just sit there and sit, 8 back and play that type of coverage all day long, it's not gonna do much for your quarterback trying to play 7-on-7 out there. So with Dante Smith, with the different options that Georgia Tech has to have, they are going to have to make moves offensively and impose their will early on. This kind of goes also, into the offensive line. Can this offensive line showcase something that, look, the jury's still out. We can slice this any way we want to about the Georgia Tech offense. We can talk about all these different things, and I've said this ad nauseum at this point. If this offensive line does not show improvement, one would think they would have to. It's really not going to matter. It doesn't matter what jersey number you got in the backfield, who starts at quarterback. It's going to be up to the offensive line to take advantage of a defensive front that on paper could be solid. It could be really good, but it's definitely not going to be the defensive front that I think they saw last season, which we talked about was the front 7. So Dante Smith, Jamie Felix, Cooley was banged up and wasn't able to kind of go the last couple weeks of fall practice, last couple practices, I should say. Can they work into a spot here where you start to kind of bring into being able to turn around, hand the ball off, and get 4 to 5 yards of carry? I think if Georgia Tech can sit if they can get 4 yards a pop on the ground, 4.5, you got to feel pretty good about their chances. I think that's kind of where they sit. So that's number 1. You have to have a really good running game. Now we go to number 2. The front 7 needs to make an early impact. Ralph, let's go back to number 1. I want to go back to number 1 real quick. I want to point something out, and this is what I was going to say earlier. On the run game to be effective, there is a different defensive scheme for Louisville this season, and you lost your top 3 linebackers. That's something that Georgia Tech has to circle. They've got to say, okay, we haven't seen a lot of these guys. They haven't seen a lot of game action. So we need to figure out what we can do and how we can expose that. There's so much prep work being done right now. I think it's going to come down to some of those in-game adjustments, especially in this scenario, because once you get through the first drive or two, the pregame jitters are out. you kind of start to get back in the rhythm of what it's like to play football. I mean, these guys haven't done this in nearly a year. I think that once that happens and the coaching staff who, if wherever Buster Faulkner is, Chris Winkie, I mean, the guys upstairs, the analysts can say, okay, this is what could work. This is what might not work. Once you get to that portion, I think that it's going to start to kind of see, you try to get into a rhythm. But look, it's going to be like two boxers feeling each other out for like the first two drives. Just kind of figuring out what each team's going to do, because especially for Louisville defensively, it's going to look way different than if you just watched the Louisville game last year. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see their defensive scheme switch up. Ralph, let's go to that next topic, though. You already saw it, but we roll and we talk about it here. The front seven needs to make an early impact. No matter, and we talked about this on the show last night, I dropped it on there, that Georgia Tech did not release a depth chart because Louisville refused to do so. So neither team will release a depth chart for this game. At least it's not an ATL chart. That's what we like to see. When we talk about this, you say, of course, once again, but what does this look like? One of the big question marks for Georgia Tech is, how do you replace the production of Keon White? You also need to ask yourself, I don't know. It's one of those things where you have to ask yourself, is there one guy in this room that can turn and become that high impact all ACC level player? Or is this by committee? Do you feel like you have the depth to be able to kind of go with a couple of different names and rotate in there? And I think Georgia Tech's in a better situation, especially on the interior, than maybe they are on the outside. I understand that you've got guys like Sylvain Yanjuan, who's played a lot of football. You got guys like Kyle Kennard, but behind them, what does that rotational depth look like from the edge? I know that a guy they're really excited about is Ichinisa Rubin, the transfer from Clemson. What can he really make an impact in this game? So all of these things to say, the front seven is going to make an early impact. And why that's important is we already talked about the chemistry and the bond between Plummer and Brom. He knows how to run this offense. Now, you got a lot of weapons at receiver that you can utilize, but I think that when we talk about the front seven and whether, the linebackers, the defensive linemen, what they're going to have to be able to do here is wreak havoc early. You're going to have to be able to make Plummer uncomfortable, one, to get the crowd juiced and into it, but two, you're going to have to rattle him early, disrupt some of that connection, and really overall create some doubt. Create some doubt in his ability to run that offense, because he's been told, and like I just said, it's been reported, oh, well, there's a connection. Well, you're really not going to know until you get under the bright lights. And so if that connection is there, it is. But if you can attempt to disrupt that in the first couple of drives, it really starts to set in as maybe this transition might not be as seamless. Maybe it might not be. It might not be as seamless. So I think that's going to be very, very, very good. And I see a comment there. We're going to get to those here in just a second. Keep the comments rolling in, the questions as well. Let's get to the third and final key for Georgia Tech in this game. The offense has to hit on explosive plays. It's not something that we've seen the Jackets do with any sort of regularity. Also, side note, that's the first time I've been able to say that word this week correctly live. It was this time, so I appreciate that for myself. Good job, Bryce. You have to hit on explosive plays. You have to be able to set the defense's understanding of that, hey, we can hit you over the top. We've heard a lot about the receivers. Haynes King talked about, them being smart, understanding what their job is and understanding the game of football. But an explosive play does not just mean Haynes King drops back and throws it 70 yards down the field. It's not what it means. It talks about yards after catch, yards after contact. What does that look like? You need your receivers to be able to run routes. You need to be able to scheme them to get open to where they can turn and get upfield, not go horizontal, but get upfield. Same thing goes for the running backs, an explosive screen pass. Using the tight ends. I mean, I think it's obvious that Dylan Leonard is the guy that they're going to roll with. Brett Seether in that conversation as well. But when you look at the tight end position, what is that going to look like in week one? Yeah, that's a lot of pressure that a lot of fans, when we talked about, Buster Faulkner way back when he was hired, that's one thing that fans have said, what is that going to look like? So all of this to say is you have to hit on explosive plays. You can't just nickel and dime it constantly down the field because it's going to start to set in that the defense doesn't have to worry about that. The safeties are going to say, hey, they're not going to go over the top of us, so we're not really worried about it. Uh, Ralph wasn't there, but Will was in the building last season. They're both in the background. The first play from scrimmage for Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims I think it was a flea flicker, and they try to throw a ball down the field. Sims throws an interception to Clemson. I'm not talking about doing something trying to have a gimmicky trick play. I think that you have a real play caller offensively that can dial some things up and understands the unit that he has, but you're going to have to be able to do some things offensively that we haven't seen yet. And we say we haven't seen yet because no one's really watched a full practice. The practice time that they're giving the media isn't really anything super of note. They're not going to run 7-on-7s typically. They're not going to run 11-on-11 for you to really to kind of see what they're doing. So all of this to say is when you turn around and you want to say, all right, what can the offense do? You got to hit on those explosive plays. You've got to create plays of 20 yards or more than your opponent. It's not something that Georgia Tech has really done in the past 4 years. We all talk about, you say you want them to be better. Well, this is one of the stats that needs to see an increase next season. You've got to see that category, that ranking rise for Georgia Tech heading into next season. So very kind of interesting thoughts there. We've talked about who is Louisville. We've talked about the three keys. Ralph, let's go right now to the final thoughts and predictions for this game. Now, if you sat with me on Thursday night, fantastic show. Really enjoyed everyone talking about here. But look, let's mention this. I said that I was going to have my preseason predictions. And then I said every single week, we're doing it on Tuesday night tonight because there's going to be only one show. Games on Friday night, flying out on Thursday. All of this to say, though, is we're going to giving a prediction each and every single week. Now, with the ebbs and flows of the season, you can hold me to the preseason one, but as things change, as expectations change, we're going to be making new predictions. So I'm going to roll with this one, and I'm going to go to the private chat over here because I think they put in for me 48.5. With two offenses that if this game were to be a shootout, and you tell me in the comments, it would really surprise me. I think that Georgia Tech's defense is nasty enough, is not going to be big play prone just from what we saw in the latter half of last season. A lot of those things and those guys carrying over. I don't think we're going to see I don't think I would take the over in a 48.5, line like that. 7.5, 8 points. I think last week I said, and you can correct me wrong, I think I said 31-20 here, for Louisville to win it. And I've even gotten a little closer. I still think that Louisville wins this football game, but I'm going to say a final score 27-21. I think that Louisville wins this. I think Georgia Tech's going to really battle. I think that, this is a game where they can definitely win this. And we talked about the keys. We talked about, all these different things. So I really enjoy these conversations because these are two teams that are pretty evenly matched. They've both got a lot of questions heading into this game that you're going to find out very quickly. And there's a lot of, we were joking earlier today, and Will said, God forbid anyone speculates. That it's kind of that season, the speculation season, and until we kind of get any type of data points, it's really hard to tell what this team is. And so that's why it's one of those things where week one, I think Louisville wins this football game. But I think that Georgia Tech can win it. I really do. And I think that they've got a chance to prove on a national stage. I think they've got a chance to announce themselves in the ACC, which would be a very key win. No pun intended. It's really hard to have a head coach the name of the key because it really takes away a lot of things you could say. But I think that you could see this team announce themselves with a presence because, look, we don't know. I mean, this prediction is just based off of, reading the preview magazines, reading what's being said out of fall camp, taking bits and pieces. We could see an offense that looks drastically different. We could see, Jack Plummer could be a guy that it just wasn't. There's a reason that he kept transferring. So I think that This is one of those things where we'll see what happens. I've got Louisville winning. That way, they would not be covering in this sense, but I do have Louisville winning this. So that's kind of the preview, the prediction, and the final thoughts. Let's get to some of these comments right here as well. I know Ralph has those starred, and so he's going to roll through this. Devon Dixon, appreciate you tuning in, Devon. Make sure you're sub to the channel. If you're listening on podcasts, make sure as well. First series, both sides of the ball, O-line and D-line will tell us if we can win the game. I think we cover the spread, though. Very fair assessment. Very fair assessment. I agree with you here. I think that you're going to know early on in the trenches where Georgia Tech stacks up, and that's going to determine a lot of the games this season. It's been an issue, for over the past couple of years. Defensive line has stepped up. Offensive line needs to in this game. Next comment we're rolling with, I think, Devon Dixon again. KY and the linebackers, that's tough to replace from both run and pass rush perspectives. But we got deeper as a unit. Devon, there's more names. There's more quality names. Can they do it by committee? That's the question I have. And we'll see. Can they do it by committee? Next one here, Vince Wilkes, Eddie Kelly, and Kevin Harris both have had good camps per the pressers, and that's something that you want to see. You talk about guys that can contribute on the edge. I think that both those guys are going to have to be utilized in some sort of rotation with Kennard and Yanjoin to be able to make an impact. Sea-Dog 18, any chance? Oh, okay, I'll keep going. Any chance? We got to wait a second. Any chance we just punch Louisville in the face and score within 5 plays? Will, Ralph, what do they call them? Prop bets? Would this be a prop bet? Like a over under 4.5 plays Georgia Tech would score on the first drive? I would take the under. I don't see this offense airing it out. I think they're going to have an identity in the passing game, but I think they lean on the run more. Who knows? We'll see. Next comment, here we go to GT Bowhunter 90. To me, Brom didn't even seem very confident team as presser. Hell, he doesn't even have a depth chart yet. But I think that not Kelly. Ooh, wrong team. Key hasn't necessarily seemed super excited, when in his press conferences. And that's kind of a welcome sight. To me, it is, at least, to have a guy that's kind of more real and not necessarily just kind of talking about whatever. We go to the next comment, GT Bill 190 once again, and he says, hit Plummer in his freaking mouth in all caps. Football is easy. Just hit somebody and make them not want to get hit again. And, you talk about, the person that made this comment has a gym selfie as their YouTube profile picture. So, that is what it is there, Jake. But no, you're exactly right. Keep rolling in these comments here. Ralph's got another one for us. Who is the player of the game for Tech? If Tech wins this game, I'm tempted to say Adante Smith. I think Smith could have a big game against this front seven, so I'm going to go with Dante Smith. That's where I'll go for that. Next comment we roll in here, Jay South. Appreciate you tuning in, Jay South. What is going to surprise us more, Tech's defense or offense? I'm going to say offense because I think that defensively, with Thacker, we understand what we're probably going to see. Offensively, I'm excited to kind of watch that. It's going to be one of those things. Next comment, we keep rolling here. Ralph's holding up the finger there in the background. John Collins, not that John Collins. Bryce, tell Brent Key to his face your score prediction for this game. I would if I had the chance, and he'd probably say we don't care, like he talked about in his press conference. So it's one of those things. Keep it rolling. Next one, Ralph. I can do the comments. It's fine. If Haynes King struggles in the first half, could we see Pyron? I don't think so. And you'd have to be talking about like monumental struggles. You don't name a starter and then just take him out after one bad half of football on a new team. You don't. What kind of confidence does that show that you had him in the first place to be able to work through some type of troubles? And I think it's one thing. I think it's one thing that fans are going to have to understand. Like, just because Haynes King won the job doesn't mean he's going to be perfect. And look, the backup quarterback's going to be the most popular guy on the team until he goes in. So I really believe that they're going to let this kind of ride out. You're going to have to work with the kid as he continues to develop into a college quarterback there as well. So keep going in those next comments here. I think we got a couple more. is Haynes King. We get down to Hayden Murphy here. Are we certain it's an upset, Hayden? Hayden and I used to live on the same hall at Berry College together. So there's that connection. We certain it's an upset, and Louisville may be very overrated, and they might be. Hayden, the only reason that I'm stating that this could be an upset is based off of the Vegas lines that have Louisville as a favorite. That's all. That's all we're going off of there. So it's going to be very, very interesting. A couple things as well. Montega, just excited to see Bryce in person as well. Devon Dixon, great question here. Any special teams updates? Brumfield has talked about its competition. I still think that while Edinburgh has some talent and some really good talent, I think we're going to see Gavin Stewart there, David Shanahan. Christian Leary is a guy that could be a returner. Malik Rutherford, another guy that could be a returner. I'm excited. It's going to be very interesting to kind of see. It's going to be one of those things. Montega, I think we win by 10. I've read good things about GT's fan ticket sales for this game. Could bode well for us. Jay South, Louisville's kicker is not great, so how much special teams could play in this game? Very much so. If Georgia Tech has more solid special teams, which they have not, we'll see. Dr. Bob there, game week, go Jackets, and TWH, Dallas, Georgia. This is a comment right here. Ralph's going to love this one. Bryce, when are you showing the juke on stream? That, if Ralph can find it real quick, we'll show it. That's all I got to say. Or we'll throw it in the Discord. Stewart consistent, but Burr has the leg. Look, I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a fun game. It's opening weekend of college football. We are going to be in attendance. The full Crowded Booth crew cannot wait to be there. We're going to be, I don't think that everyone else is. I think that I will be patrolling around. I think that the other two, frankly, may not want to interact with all the people. That's completely fine, though. But we'll see. We'll see. Oh, he found it. He found it. Let's watch this, folks. This is just prime time here. The pick across the middle of the field, and then watch this play right here. Oh, gosh. Oh, no. You got to love it. I was hyped, though. That was 2013. It was 10 years ago. 10-year anniversary of the Juke. Absolutely love it. Hey, absolutely love it. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe as well. We've been talking Georgia Tech. We will be back once again. One show talking about Georgia Tech this week. Tomorrow night, we're going to be previewing. You're going to want to join in, talking college football with the crew. And we're also going to take a look. We're going to get some opinions from some other people on this Georgia Tech Louisville game as one of our pick'em games of the week. Couple of notes for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video. If you're listening on podcast anywhere, make sure to follow that Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you may get that. Join the Discord. Check out the merch. We got In Key We Trust shirts. We got Swarm Talk shirts. We have Bobby Dodd Stadium shirts and great stuff. Crowded Booth merch as well. Check all of that out in the comments section below. So, hey, we are excited. We will we'll go right here. Rec Talk called you out. Any response? Key to success. Man, love Rec Talk. It was a very interesting video. I will say that. It was very interesting. And hopefully we will be able to make up on Friday night. We'll see. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Once again, Ralph, I'll hit it. This has been an episode of The Crowded Booth. We will see you next time, tomorrow night, 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern, talking college football. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.